So here's a big question for you. Could a company that was only started back in 2018 really be on its way to becoming the McKesson of India? A true titan in healthcare distribution? Well, that is the bold claim we are digging into today with Entero Healthcare. Let's get into it.
Okay, to really get what's going on, you have to look at this slide. It tells you everything you need to know. Over on the left, you've got the U.S. market. It's totally dominated by three giants. We're talking McKesson, Cencora, and Cardinal Health. They control over 90% of the entire market. It's a classic oligopoly, right? Built on incredible scale. But then you look over at India, and it's the complete opposite. It's a massive, fast-growing market, but the top three players control less than 10%. It is fragmented, it's chaotic, and frankly, it is just ripe for a revolution.
And that's where the protagonists of our story comes in. Entero Healthcare. They look at all that fragmentation, and they don't see a problem. Nope. They see the single biggest opportunity in the entire Indian healthcare space. So let's dive into the first big idea here, what we're calling the consolidation thesis. And look, this isn't just about one company trying to grow. This is about the potential for a massive, structural shift in an entire industry's supply chain. The core bet here is actually pretty simple. The whole thesis is that India's current system with over 65,000, let me say that again, 65,000 small distributors is just not sustainable. The belief is that sooner or later it has to consolidate. It's going to look a lot more like the West with just a few big organized players running the show. And Entero? Well, their entire reason for being is to bet that they can be the ones to lead that charge and capture that historic shift.
Okay, so having a big idea is one thing, but how do you actually pull it off? That brings us to Entero's playbook. It's called the roll-up, and believe me, it is aggressive.
So the name of the game here is something called a roll-up. It's a classic business strategy, and it's exactly how giants like McKesson were built, over decades. You go into a market that's broken up into a million little pieces, you start buying up the best of the smaller successful companies, and you stitch them all together into one massive, super efficient machine. You're basically creating scale where none existed before.
And their process for doing this is this really smart four-step flywheel. So step one, they don't just buy any random company. They go after the well-run market leaders in different regions. Step two, they're smart about the price, paying about 5 to 8 times a company's operating profit. Then step three, and this is the really critical modern piece, they plug all these acquisitions into one central tech platform. And finally, step four, they hit the accelerator, turbocharging growth by giving these local guys the product range and buying power of a national giant. See how it works? Each step feeds the next.
All right, so we've got the big idea, and we've got the playbook. Now for the fun part. What's the prize at the end of all this? What could this company actually look like if this strategy works out over the long haul?
Just look at that number. A detailed forecast shows the potential for nearly a 9-fold jump in revenue over the next 15 years. That is the kind of massive scale we're talking about here. We're talking about going from a pretty big company today to an absolute behemoth.
And this table really lays out that whole 15-year journey. You can see the different phases. So we start right here, in the base year. Then they hit the scale phase, and that is all about just rapid growth, doubling revenue in just 3 years. After that, it's the optimization phase. This is where the focus shifts from pure growth to efficiency, and you can see the margins start to climb, going from about 3.4% all the way up to a really stable 7.2%. This chart is basically the roadmap from a high-growth disruptor to a dominant, profitable market leader.
And here's the real kicker. Here's why all this matters. If they actually hit those profit numbers, the potential value of the whole company could be close to 48,000 crore rupees. Now, you compare that to its valuation today, and you're looking at a potentially massive return for anyone who believes in this long-term story. The numbers are incredible, right? The story is super compelling. It almost feels inevitable. But is it? Is this growth story really unstoppable?
Well, let's pump the brakes a little bit, because for every amazing growth story, there is always a bear case. And for Entero, there are 3 really big risks that could just completely knock this whole train off the tracks.
Okay, risk number 1 is the big one. Regulation. The Indian government is always trying to make drugs cheaper, and they could, literally with the stroke of a pen, put a hard cap on the profit margins for distributors. It's called trade margin rationalization, and it's a potential killer. If that happens, Entero's entire business model just breaks. It's a low probability risk for sure, but the impact would be absolutely catastrophic.
Risk number 2 comes directly from their roll-up strategy. See, when you buy a company, Any amount you pay over its hard asset value gets recorded on your books as something called goodwill. Entero has over 4 billion rupees of this stuff. Now, if the companies they bought start to underperform, they're forced to write down that goodwill, and that flows right through to their reported profits. It looks terrible on paper, and it can cause investors to panic and the stock to just plummet.
And finally, there's just plain old market risk. Right now, the company's stock is priced for perfection. The market is already assuming that this flawless execution we've talked about is going to happen. And what that means is that any little stumble, a missed earnings quarter, slightly slower growth, could lead to a really sharp and painful drop in the stock price. There is just zero room for error.
So there you have it. You've got the bull case, this huge, once-in-a-generation opportunity. And you've got the bear case, a trio of risks that could be fatal. So let's try to balance it all out and land on a final verdict.
You know, maybe this one quote from the analysis we read sums it up perfectly. Entero is building a moat, right? A competitive advantage based on its scale and technology. But that moat isn't finished. It's still under construction. It is absolutely not the impenetrable fortress they want it to be. Not yet. It's a work in progress, and that means it's still vulnerable.
So, what should you really take away from all this? Well, first, remember that Entero is a pure bet on the formalization of India's healthcare supply chain. Second, all of its growth is coming from that aggressive roll-up strategy. Third, yeah, the long-term potential looks enormous, but, and this is a big but, fourth, that path is just littered with some very real landmines, from regulators to financials to its own valuation.
Which leaves us with the ultimate question, doesn't it? Are we watching the construction of India's next great healthcare fortress, a dominant player that'll be around for decades? Or are the risks just too great, making this whole thing an incredibly ambitious but ultimately fragile house of cards? I guess only time will tell.